Welcome to Matt's Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier, and as always, thank you for stopping by. Let me start with the Mindspeak session we did with the new African Union Commission President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. It's a very interesting one we did in Kigali, and speaks to his skill set and his determination and his organizational abilities, including his sense of inclusiveness and much more. Do take a look. Macro Thoughts Cambria Global Asset Allocation ETF, which attempts to replicate the global market portfolio, having its worst days since early March. That's from the stalwart. A sea of red across world markets today. That's yesterday. Not something investors have seen too much of recently. That's Reuters' Jamie. Razia Khan delivered a great 1-hour exposition, spin through the world, what's going on, with a focus on Africa. That link is on rich wrap-ups as well. Apple is at the 100-day moving average, according to the stalwart. And the VIX index is up 65% since early January, yet it remains below 15. Home thoughts, time just seems to fly away for a boy. That, I suppose, is why one day you wake up suddenly and you ain't a boy any longer. Robert Ruark. Rich, the old man said dreamily, is not baying after what you can't have. Rich is having the time to do what you want to do. Rich is a little whiskey to drink and some food to eat and a roof over your head and a fishbowl and a boat and a gun and $1 for a box of shells. Rich is not owing any money to anybody and not spending what you haven't got. Tonight, I believe in Africa, in Kenya, we get the opportunity to see the blue moon, the supermoon and the blood moon, which all coincide in 2018 for the first time since 1866. Apparently, we've got to look out for moonrise, according to the articles I've read. A blue moon, a second full moon in a calendar month. A supermoon, when the moon is unusually close to Earth, making it bigger and brighter. And a blood moon, a moment during an eclipse when the moon appears red, will all coincide for the first time since 1866. Political reflections, a near miss of Russian and US jets caught on video, pretty near from what I could see. And in a piece I wrote, China Rising, which I've been referring to in the context of India, but in that article I also said talk of a unipolar, US-dominated world has largely evaporated. President Putin refused to be rolled over by a Victoria Newland-inspired colour revolution in the Ukraine and drew a line in the sand. And one of the collateral consequences of that was to send President Putin into the ready embrace of Xi Jinping. In fact, far from being a unipolar world, I said, we have entered a bipolar or even tripolar world, US, China and Russia. I like this. You can also follow our live blog on President Donald Trump's State of the Union address in Japanese. It's on Bloomberg. I thought he played it well. Expectations were rock bottom, but nevertheless, he painted a much more inclusive picture in his speech than he necessarily is pursuing in his legislation, but it was effective, I think. Asso Chainsaw tweeted, it's going to be a speech about love. He always wears the blue tie when he's going to be sweet. POTUS said, because Americans are dreamers too, that was rather clever as well. North Korean defector whom he cited, Ji Seong-ho, raised his crutches as he is recognized by President Trump at the Sawtooth. Stephen Miller, who tends to be the darker speechwriter of his, said Democrats can boo their way to Trump's re-election in 2020. We can't discount that, I'm afraid. Meet Joe Kennedy, the Democrat taking on Trump, delivering the Sawtooth rebuttal. That article is in Rolling Stone. So, what do I think? On balance, I think he did far better than many expected. I think, after that very dark dystopian speech he made 10 months ago or whatever it was, this was much brighter, more inclusive. The divergence from his core legislative program, of course, is another matter altogether. I'm just talking about the rhetorics of the speech, how it might be received. The old model, where the state is employer of first resort, is no longer viable, said Madame Lagarde. The Arab world must take urgent action to create jobs and increase social spending to contain simmering public discontent, she said. The public dissatisfaction that is bubbling up in several countries is a reminder that even more urgent action is needed, Lagarde told a two-day conference. Governments in the region have struggled to meet popular expectations of more equitable economic growth and greater political freedom that were unleashed by the Arab Spring uprisings that swept the Middle East in 2011. While the global economy is growing at the fastest pace in a decade, according to the IMF projections, conflict and lower commodity prices have taken their toll on Arab economies. At 3.5% in 2018 and 2019, forecast growth in the Arab world is well below the average 5.6% achieved between 2000 and 2008, Lagarde said. While Arab countries have focused their economic reform agendas on job-creating growth, the progress is not enough. Cash-strapped governments should develop broader, more equitable tax bases to help pay for more social services and infrastructure spending, in which the Arab region lags emerging Europe, she said. They should also encourage private sector job creation to ease the burden on state budgets. The old model where the state is employer of first resort is no longer viable. She's entirely correct. And the question is, it was quite interesting in a discussion I had with Razia. Razia was saying the same thing. She says, people become better off, they expect more democracy. You've got to widen the tax stake. So basically tax with representation and tax without representation is a very difficult moment. She was mentioning that. Professor Teufel Dreyer, meanwhile, expects proof someday that Admiral Zheng He arrived in Antarctica before the penguins. Or perhaps that the penguins, given their similar colour, evolved from pandas who arrived in Antarctica over a now disappeared land bridge from China. He's, of course, speaking tongue-in-cheek. This is regarding this new Arctic passage that's being bolted on to the One Belt, One Road project of Xi Jinping. Going back to my article in August 2017, China Rising, China has established control over the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands and then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. It is a mind-boggling geopolitical advance any which way you care to cut it. China has advanced its footprint in Pakistan, where it has leased the Gwadar port, giving China and Central Asia access to the Gulf region and to the Middle East for 43 years. Sri Lanka, which gorged on Chinese debt, has had to disgorge the Hambantota port to its creditor, 99 years. And recently we saw China formally open a military facility in Djibouti. These moves taken together speak to a material Chinese advance. The pivot to Asia, which was supposed to contain China, is dead in the water. China sprung that trap, and now they're headed to the Arctic. Let's move on to international markets. The parabolic advance of the Dow Jones has been violated. That's Peter L. Brent. But charters don't follow, and he's looking now for a 10 to 15% correction. Currency markets, let's take a look at that. Euro dollar, where are we? 124.42. Dollar index 88.95. Japanese yen, which I noticed one of the BOJ members was trying to talk down, 108.71. Swiss franc 0.9324. The pound, which has been on a roll, 142. The Australian dollar, where's that? 0.8090. India rupee 63.715. South Korean won 1068.39. Brazilian real 318.12. Egyptian pound 17.6613, and the South African rand, about which I'm extremely bullish, 11.9525. I believe it's going to 11. Dollar index, this is a chart from Holger, last just below 89. My target was 88, but I'm inclined to think we might get a little bit of a push higher in the dollar index within that downtrend. Dollar yen, now this is interesting, caught me off guard. Correlation with US 10-year yields has broken down, reaching its largest divergence since July 2014. Dollar yen tends to follow US 10-year yields. As US 10-year yields head higher, we tend to find that people buy the dollar, sell the yen. But look at this chart and it explains to you how it broke down. Euro dollar last trading at 124.43. I think it's in a range of 123.40, 125.60 for now. As I said on the 2nd of January, I'm no longer bullish Bitcoin. In fact, I'm bearish. Bitcoin is headed for its worst monthly slide since December 2013. We've just regained the 10,000 level, but we were deep. Well, not so deep. We were below it earlier today. January is turning into a month to forget for digital currency investors. Cryptocurrencies are extending losses with Bitcoin headed for its worst monthly slide since December 2013 on the last day of January, trading as US regulators ramp up their scrutiny of one of the world's largest digital currency exchanges, while Facebook is banning ads tied to the industry. Bitcoin is down about 31% this month, trading as low as 9,817 earlier today. The regulatory oversight and the clampdown is really coming to the fore right now. Stephen Innes, head of trading for Asia Pacific at Oanda. I don't think we've seen the last of it. As I said on the 2nd of January, I'm no longer bullish, I'm bearish. 27th of November, I also said Bitcoin, wow, what a ride. I'd recommended it at the beginning of the year at 1,000. I recommended we get out of it at 10,000, just over 10,000. Subsequently, we went all the way to 19,000. But I've known many people who've tried to squeeze the last bits of profit and then they've got caught out. And I was more worried about being caught out than squeezing that last element of profit. Bitcoin is crashing some more ahead of the SOTU. That was Joe Wiesenthal. Have a look at his chart. I wrote a piece, the millennials with their avocado eating. I think I've got to add in hummus eating as well. And cryptocurrency trading ways are just as likely to be African as they are European or American. Rich folks are fleeing London and Lagos. The wealth report shows wealthy Londoners are leaving the city as new taxes make it expensive to inherit and invest, and as Brexit prompts rich Europeans living in the UK capital to return home. This puts the British financial hub in the same category as Lagos and Istanbul, which are also seeing net outflows of rich people, according to the Global Wealth Migration Review published this month. About 5,000 high net worth individuals left the UK during 2017, and only about 1,000 arrived. Over the past 30 years, the United Kingdom has been one of the biggest recipients of migrating high net worth individuals. However, this trend changed in 2017 when the country experienced its first major high net worth net outflow. Cities that saw large inflows include Auckland, Dubai, Montreal, New York, Tel Aviv, and Toronto. Let's move on to the onto the commodity markets. Gold, where are we? 1343 trading, so pretty well supported. Obviously looking at the dollar a little bit more closely these days. Crude oil futures in New York settled at $64.50 a barrel, which was down 1.62% and subsequently have fallen further. So US crude right now is trading at $64. Brent crude is at $68. You know, my target for WTI was 65 or below that. My target for Brent was 70. We hit both targets. I'm a little bit sidelined. Tactically, I think it's a little bit of a trading buy, but you know, the conviction is not as strong as it was when I was convinced it was hitting 70 and it was at 62. Let's move on to Sub-Saharan Africa. Chinese bugs expose Africa's weak defenses, says the Financial Times. There is nothing new about governments spying on each other. They do it all the time. So African officials should not be surprised if Chinese state contractors hardwired the African Union headquarters in Ethiopia to Beijing They were given the opportunity by the Pan-African body not only to construct the building, but also to provide everything inside, from phones and voting technology to furniture, and to maintain these on contracts paid by Beijing. What is more surprising is that the AU was so willing to invite Chinese ears in. The new building, which dominates the skyline of Addis Ababa, was financed by Beijing to the tune of $200 million and opened at a 2012 summit by the then Chinese President Hu Jintao. At the time, the EU was by far the biggest donor to AU operations, including peacekeeping. Allegations about the colossal data breach at the AU headquarters provide a cautionary tale about the dangers of developing fresh dependencies. According to an investigation carried out by Le Monde, AU officials discovered a year ago that confidential data had been downloaded from the AU to servers in Shanghai every night since soon after the inauguration. Further afield, the reported data breach will no doubt reignite concerns about technological backdoors in Chinese hardware. Chinese contractors have built presidential palaces and parliament buildings from Khartoum to Maputo. The two state-backed telecoms companies Huawei and ZTE supply equipment in 50 African countries. According to McKinsey, the potential for China to misuse these assets to gain advantages there, given how blurred the distinction is between state policy and commercial strategy. No doubt China's burgeoning engagement in Africa has brought great benefits. However, the hidden price may be high. African governments should treat China's avowed doctrine of non-interference with skepticism. Above all, they need to develop strategies to do business with Beijing, not as supplicants, but on their own terms, which was the point I made in the previous article in the FT when I said the hack was really alarming, partly because it exposed African countries have no leverage over China, which is, I think, what that article is saying as well. And I also added, I said, there's this theory in Africa that China is Santa Claus. It isn't. Our leaders need to be disavowed of that notion. African leaders choose diplomacy, to Trump's toilet remarks. President Kagame in particular. I've met the President of the United States, but the President of the United States is Trump, he told reporters in Addis Ababa. For me, the most value is to meet the President of the United States. When the United States decides to give us Trump as their president, we will deal with that president. The fury appears to have been muted by a letter sent by Trump to African leaders in the past week in which he said he deeply respects the people of Africa. Trump also pledged that US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will make an extended visit to the continent in March, his first in that role. So Trump called Kagame a friend when they met at the World Economic Forum. So interesting times. Do look at that mind-speak session with President Kagame. It's well worth a watch. South African all-share had given up some of its gains. It's now plus 0.7% year to date. Viceroy Research, who came out with that really hard-hitting report that undid Christo Visa's empire, have now come out and called Capitec Bank a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that link is there. Do take a look. It's a pretty interesting report. It's on Rich Wrap-Up, so you can flick through and look at the original. I wrote about this on the 25th of September last year, reputational risk and a cautionary tale from South Africa, and then the man with the Midas touch, Christo Visa. So Viceroy Research shorted Steinhoff. Now they're talking of finding a new target. There's a video that this man gave on Bloomberg, well worth listening to. He's got a very interesting business plan with a very high return on investment. According to Saab, taking the other side, according to all the information available, Capitec is solvent, well capitalized, and has adequate liquidity. The bank meets all prudential requirements. So let's see where that goes. Dollar versus rand. I'll see you all at 11. We're now at 11.95.25. Nigerian all-share up 16.34% this year. Ghana's cocoa bodies to sell $556 million of debt and end subsidies to farmers. Ghana Stock Exchange, the best performing in Africa this year, up 18.64% year to date. Destination Tanzania tweeted Ngorongoro crater, Tanzania, the crater under the big African sky. I went there when I was about 10 with my father, my brothers and my mother. And it was a remarkable place. Baobab trees framing a serene view of night skies in Tarangire National Park, Tanzania. I met somebody in Levo who told me that's the place to go and see the lions. There's apparently hundreds of them. Opposition fortunes wane as Tanzania's president rules supreme. This is Bloomberg. 2 years into his rule, Tanzanian President John Magufuli has some unexpected new fans, his political opponents. His chief rival in the 2015 vote, Edward Lowassa, has praised his reforms and urged others to support them. Backing the opposition in an authoritarian state is backing a losing horse, said Dan Paget, a doctoral candidate researching Tanzania at the University of Oxford. And that's the point. People are defecting from the opposition not only because they love Magufuli, but because they fear him. That's the point. Then Magufuli is pursuing policies that were the opposition's. He's also gained backing from his confrontations with foreign investors. A demand for $190 billion in back taxes from Acacia Mining led to the company agreeing, under duress, to establish a model to equally share the economic benefits from its mines and pay $300 million to the state as a show of good faith. I don't even know if that money was ever paid. Zito Kabwe, leader of the Opposition Alliance for Change and Transparency, acknowledged Magufuli's anti-graft crusade is taking the message away from the opposition. Whilst you may not always agree with the way he does things, his heart is in the right place and it is having an impact on the lives of everyday Tanzanians. Masha said there is accountability in Tanzania with regards to corruption, for example, for the first time in a long time. Just looking at Magufuli, Tanzania versus Kenya, and looking at the geopolitical situation, what I call the transit state, that pipeline that's going from Uganda to Tanga, the railway which now seems to be connecting between Rwanda and Tanzania, he is creaming Kenya. This should be a subject for discussion and should be on the radar of the national interest. But he is creaming us in part, I think, because his background's in infrastructure, he understands the pricing, and he knows where to undercut us. Kenyan opposition leader declared himself president, skirting the constitution. Quite a lot of drama yesterday. Came to the office super early. And then at something like 8 o'clock, there was simply no one there, and then a ton of people flooded into Uhuru Park. I wish to thank the people of Kenya for the mandate they've given us and for their steadfast confidence in us, Raila Odinga. You came from all corners of the Republic to witness my inauguration. It was good to see you out in millions. John Angleby posted this photograph. Crowd at Uhuru Park is now in the tens of thousands. Now, there were a lot of people there, fair enough. But where were Kalonzo Musyoka, Mudavadi and Betangula, who said issues beyond their comprehension and control stopped a NASA summit meeting today, and they wow the coalition leadership is strong and united. Then Kalonzo Musyoka says Moses Wetangula, Musalia Mudavadi and I did not make it to Uhuru Park because we've been detained in an undisclosed room in the city. That's what happened. Well, whatever it is, it diminished that swearing in. Not to have a single partner from outside your tribal stronghold is not good. Fred Matiang'i declared that the National Resistance Movement is an organized criminal group as per the Prevention of Organized Crimes Act 2010. I still think we should be pursuing this, not with a sledgehammer. President Kenyatta jetted back from the AU summit, and maybe that's what sort of stayed the police's hand, in that he was in the AU and it would have been very negative on the TV broadcasts as shut as thousands gather for Kenyan opposition swearing in. Kenyan authorities shut down private television and radio stations on Tuesday as thousands of supporters of opposition leader Raila Odinga gathered in a Nairobi Park where he was due to take the presidential oath in an act of protest. Odinga said, "Today is a typical example of a rogue state. We are seeing the return of an authoritarian imperial presidency in our country. They rule by fiat, and this is what must be resisted." So, what do we make of all of this? I think, look, the fact that no one else turned up from his coalition says it all. And as I've said, it's a political cul-de-sac, and nothing has changed my mind. Have a listen to Sander Ojiambo, who made a MindSpeak presentation ahead of Eric Solheim last Saturday. She's really very good. Nairobi All Shares up 5.75% so far this year, not too far off a record high. Ever Ready East Africa reported full year earnings per share surged 229.592%. Sales slumped 38.745%. The gain on disposal of assets was 452 million. If you strip that out, they would have made a loss. Profit and loss before tax 249 million, up 213%. They actually made profit and loss for the year after tax up 229%. Earnings per share was 1 shilling and 27 cents. They're paying 1 shilling as a special dividend. During the year under review, we experienced a significant downturn in the economy following a prolonged period of electioneering, insecurity in certain segments of the market, weak credit growth, creeping inflation and drought. These factors, together with our status as a new entrant in the battery business, resulted in a decline in revenues. Sale of our Nakuru property, which was finalized in the year under review, led to a gain of 452 million. From the sale proceeds were used to clear the company's debts and provide working capital to support the business. Without the disposal, they would have booked a loss. They've piled a great deal back into the business, a business in which they have not made a profit for years. But it is a cheap share, plus you're getting a handsome dividend. Kenol Cobil is up 5.714%. It's going to go higher. But interestingly, that huge surge in activity we saw last week was an internal trade, is what they're saying. Safaricom, that's up 11.214% year to date, just off a record high. Barclays, that's up 9.375% year to date, trailing P of 7.721, probably got more to go. KCB, which ramped 1.7% higher yesterday, that's up 4.678% year to date. Trailing PE is 6.927. Equity Bank, which is up 8.176% year to date, trails on a trading P of 9.817. And EABL pushed up to a 2018 high. It's plus 6.722% this year. Reported first half earnings. If you're interested in that, just click on the company data to find out what happened there. And then finally, the NSE 20 is up for 0.43% so far this year. Thank you for stopping by.